Okay, well, hello and welcome to the Strategy Room interview series. I'm Pete Lawson. I'm your host today, and I'm joined by no other than Ed Jarecki, Jarecki Business Coaching. Now, Ed's got some great experiences. We've had a bit of a chat before the podcast today, and I tell you what, here and now, go and grab a pen and paper. You guys are going to be writing copious notes through this, and you're going to go through a great learning curve, I guarantee. Ed, thanks so much for joining us today. I appreciate your time, and I know you're a busy man. Ed, can we start by telling us a little bit about your story from, I guess from where you started on your journey to where you sit now in that chair?
Well, my journey started, believe it or not, when I was in my late teens, and I became a young department manager at a Kmart retail store. And within a fairly short amount of time, they had me as a department manager for a couple departments, including home improvement, which was its own P&L. And what I was able to see immediately is everything that was broken and needed to be fixed, from the merchandise that was being sold to the cleanliness and organization of the department to the customers and the care that was offered them, et cetera. And I actually, within the first year, grew the revenue about 50%. And they moved me the following year, added the garden center in partnership with one of the assistant store managers at the time. And we took that from 600,000 to 2 million in 2 years. And it was that ability to kind of see the future, engineer the path from where they were at to that future that helped guide me through that. And after that, and through that period as well, I started my degree in engineering.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the same thing. I chose engineering because I am a high analytic and I love solutions, but I've got a great capacity for seeing that vision of the future and then engineering that path forward. And so throughout my career, I've run P&Ls. I moved over into technology after running P&Ls because I was specifically focused on business enablement through different type of technology implementations, business transformations, technology transformations. And within that core, I also spent 4.5 years in total quality management as a TQM consultant and trainer. And that really took my education up to that point, both my work education and my formal education, and combined it into a role and kind of molded it into best practices. Total quality management is all around finding people, process, technology wrapped in the right environment to deliver win-win-win outcomes. And that never left me. Matter of fact, I was warned by multiple executives at the organizations that I've worked through over the years that, you're focused too much on what's right and not enough on, just do what I say. And I've always been willing to challenge that status quo and have had, several failings along the way as a result of that discrepancy. That ultimately took me to my business today because I had to ask myself the question, out of all of my corporate experiences, there was always milestone happiness. The journey itself was never fun. It was never life. You forced fun into it in pieces and parts. I was like, this isn't the way to live. It's really, what's really important: family, friends, the close relationships around us. To our earlier conversation, health. Money really isn't a part of that equation, but if you have a passion and you do those other things right, you'll have the money you need to live the lifestyle that you want, especially with persistence and continued improvement in what you're doing and how you're approaching it. And so that's just the way my mind has always worked. And now it's focused, instead of dealing with corporate politics on a regular basis, it's dealing day in and day out with helping others achieve their success. I offer people all of the time. You have a question? It won't cost you anything. Call me. I'm happy to help in any way that I can. Whether you take it and employ it and I hope it works, I generally try to offer incredibly valuable advice. That's up to you. So to me, it doesn't matter. And, that's been my focus. I have the ability to manifest with that, vision of that solution or that situation, and then help develop the tactics and the paths to get there, to get to that success.
Ed, you've sort of half answered this question. I want to drill down a little deeper if I could. If you could share a story of what really was the inspiration, what really inspired you to become a business coach?
Well, like I said, this has been a long part of my journey. I've done intermittent consulting and I've always done coaching with my teams and
Yep.
beyond. I've developed 2 leadership learning forums starting back and manifesting from my 2004 1 year experience in an LLF and developed them myself. So in the last organization that I worked for, it was one of the most brutal environments that I'd ever worked. And what I found is that I still found great pleasure in 2 things. Number two, I'll start with that, was being really able to enable that organization in ways that it had not been before. And that was a tall order. And we actually made a lot of accomplishment in a relative short amount of time, given very limited resources. But the bigger value proposition I received from it was when I introduced my leadership learning forum for the second time. And these are ongoing programs helping engineers, network engineers, infrastructure engineers, and others really understand what leadership principles are and apply them individually and as a team to build their collaboration. And being able to physically see, to feel the changes in the relationships with every person on that team, from my lowest engineer or network administrator up to, the directors that I had working for me, was just a wonderful experience. And so when I left that role, I started immediately. I've got an LLC an S corp that I started doing some consulting under, and I was like, well, what's the rest of my life going to look like? And to be honest, I started looking and applying for different jobs. I hired a major firm to help me with my career path. And through that, what I found is that every time I tried to, I went out and applied for another corporate job, it would make me physically ill. And so it was like, okay, this is not, money is wonderful, as an executive, but it's not manifesting itself within me. And to that conversation we had relative to health, it was really putting my health in decline. And so I went back to what makes me happy. And what makes me happy is making other people happy.
Yep. Yeah, excellent. So, if you could give me a definition of how do you define success in your coaching practice? How do you know when the job's done?
Well, done is an interesting word, but the way I would say it is when I've enabled them as a human being,
Mm-hmm.
and second, their business to achieve the goals, achieve success in their work and life. So the questions that I always ask out of the gate are, what are your business goals? What are your 5-year plans? Now, we can go 3 years, 7 years, 10 years. I had one client earlier, they're working on a 10-year plan. And that's fine. But the second question to that, which is really the more important question, is what's your personal goals? Why are you doing this? What's your North Star that's going to guide you through the trials and tribulations that every single business has, that every journey has? And it's being able to, number one, understand where they're at, what their current challenges are, and help them through those challenges to a point where they've achieved that balance and they've started to see the understand and be able to start pull and push on those levers of success within their own lives and business.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So going on from there, what do you find is the biggest challenge you face when starting your coaching business? And, how did you overcome that?
I think the biggest challenge for me was I have all this skill and capability. How do I package this in a way that allows me to shift and adapt to the needs of specific businesses and business owners out there,
Mm.
and as an extension, their leaders and their teams. And that was the easier part of the equation. For me, as we were discussing earlier, it was really the sales and the marketing.
Mm.
I figured ultimately I'd be able to figure out the marketing piece. And it's not that I haven't done sales in my life. We're all salespeople in different ways at different points of our lives. But at the same time, when it came to my corporate experiences, I always had a sales team in front of me, and they brought me in as the product expert or something like
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
as a technology expert or
yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah.
And so it was easy, I'm there to offer insights, questions, help, determine paths.
Mm.
And I'm politely and professionally, but brutally honest. Um, and that always, offered me much more success than it did challenges throughout those aspects of my career.
Um, so you've had a well, when we look at coaching per se, you've had a relatively short career. It's been a year and a bit with the organisation with now, but in fact, Ed, you've come to a realisation that you've been coaching all your life.
Yep.
So can you discuss any significant setback you faced and the impact it had on your approach to coaching?
Well, just when I came out of fourth quarter to 2023, I had November. I lost a half a dozen deals because of different types of circumstances. These were all very small client relationships.
Mm.
And I believe every one of them was sincere in the challenges that they were faced with. I had one that lost funding. I had another that wound up getting hit with identity theft, fraud, and I had others that had similar types of
Mm.
challenges. Going into December, I didn't even have one good, opportunity for business in the month of December. So I came out into January, picked up where I had left off, started sending out, building my branding, building my messaging and stuff
Mm.
like that. And by this time, I had done my very first online video, basically starting to bridge that gap as who is this guy with all these posts and stuff out there,
Yep.
and trying to help people get to know me a little bit.
Mm.
Well, by the end of January, the path that I was on, I had free group coaching events
Mm.
weekly, turn those into free weekly networking
Yep.
events, and they just weren't working. And so the question is how do I meet more of the right people um,
Yep.
for my coaching business? And what are the avenues to get there? And that's where it was recommended to me to look at a podcast. Initially, it was, well, just do what you do as part of your typical conversations, talk about their goals and da
Mm.
da da.
Mm.
And I was like, that's just not me. I'm an engineer. Uh, we'll just say I'm anal when it comes to I want things,
Yeah.
defined well. And it's not that they're going to be perfect, but I don't want to just walk into something without considering, how am I going to do it? How do I package it? How do I create the win-win-win outcomes and things
Mm.
like that? So it took me about, 4, 5, 6 weeks to build out the framework, the package, build out a common storyboard, buy the software, learn the software, develop the process, the end-to-end process for it. And since then, that's where everything started to kind of turn the corner. But then even having the podcasts, who are the guests, and what are the questions
Mm.
that I still grapple with to some degree. But I'm open to everybody. I don't, as long as they're fit that business owner, entrepreneur, or professional, and they've got a good story to share, and most people do, then they're candidates for the podcast show. But the question is how do I develop the longer term relationship and ultimately getting to the referrals and the sales that I'm looking to accomplish? And it took me a couple of months before I started to figure out on the back end of these sessions, start asking more questions. I already had um, 2 sessions with them. I have a 20, 30-minute get-to-know session, and sometimes those go a little long, and sometimes they're, in the 20-minute range.
Yep.
So I've already got to know them as a human, a little bit about their business. And then we have the podcast recording session. And it's all about getting to know them and their business for my audience. And then, of course, I get to enjoy that as well. And so by the time that's done, I've got something more to talk to them about. And so I'll ask them questions. And part of what I'm learning to do is to gauge, what kind of interaction, I should have with them. In some cases, it's just about establishing the relationship and continuing to develop and build a trusting relationship with them. In other cases, they may be more ready. I've actually had two people reach out to be on my podcast because they wanted to be on it. They wanted to meet me, and I'm in the process right now of building some longer term business relationships with them. So that has been really the key to my current success. But one of the things that you said earlier also resonates with me. I'm a numbers guy. I'm an analytic. So where I can provide more concrete understanding of the benefits for doing things in certain best practice ways. I also very much align with that. So I started developing part of that for my system and working with Focal Point to enable that as a next generation to the Way to Wealth series that originally authored by Brian Tracy, co-founder of Focal Point. And then there's one other system out there, a couple of systems that I've been familiarized with, but one in particular that offers a very streamlined process and approach to be able to focus there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my second consideration is, for what I do, I can bring a whole lot to the table, but I need to narrow my focus and come up with that pathway that allows me to connect more quickly with that, bottom line value of why coaching is important, why they need it, and what it means to them and their business success.
Ed, I'm just going to take you back to when we started the answer to this particular question. Take you back to that Q3, December 2023. Your clients were going through some challenges. So what's the most important lesson that you've learned from your clients?
Well, with my personality, I think it's the relationship marketing side. It's focus on the relationships and don't let the small challenges, once in a while on podcasts we're ghosted, and I put in several hours of effort before we get to that recording session. So, learning to just go with the flow, not react to it, and just keep moving forward. And that's the key. It's staying calm. It's keeping moving forward. There are things that are going to bother each of us, but getting through that quickly, getting back on the positive mental path to continue to make small improvements every day will ultimately culminate into large successes over time.
Okay. Let's stay on this relationship thing, Ed, if we could, because you've emphasised that a few times in this relationship marketing, whatnot. What strategies do you recommend for building and maintaining strong relationships?
Well, first of it is don't go into it head first with the sales approach.
Yeah,
it's really about getting to know them and then providing mechanisms for them to get to know you. Sometimes those are direct questions. So I've had some people come in and they'll drill me on my past and, basically challenging, do I have the skills and experience to really help? And in other cases, they really don't care about that. There's a almost automatic trust that I'm doing what I'm doing because I have those skills. So they really want to talk more about who they are, what they bring to the table as an input into the podcast, the podcast outcome. So really it revolves around just understanding people. So I typically start the engagements with a disc profile. Some customers, some of my clients already have done those. So if they don't want to do it again, then we'll leverage what they've got. But it's know thyself.
Yes.
then know thy business, know thy customers, know thy team. And
Yep.
so it's really helping on that front, as developing that trust and relationship up front. But it's different for different people with different personality profiles. And that's something I continue to develop in myself, is understanding how to, interface with people that have different characteristics.
Perfect answer. I'll talk to you about a book that I read about the DISC profile, and it puts it into a very understanding light. But Ed, today you have given us a lot of understandings about things, and thank you so much for your time today. It was absolutely great meeting you, and also learning about your entrepreneurial journey. I mean, what a journey that has been. I mean, we've probably only scratched the surface. We haven't even done that. But thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Now, to everyone watching today, do yourselves a favour. I've written 2 pages of notes here, ladies and gentlemen. This is an absolutely fantastic podcast. Everybody in this room can learn a lot from what Ed has to say today. So get onto this, take plenty of notes, and keep them aside, because you'll be going back to them for sure. Look, to everyone watching, I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. And it's either good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'll see you on the other side.
Thanks, everybody.